company that helped fill America's driveways for decades, just packed its bags and walked away. Subaru, one of Japan's most trusted automakers, is shutting down production for Canadian buyers in the United States. The reason? Trump's tariffs. What was meant to bring manufacturing home has instead driven it away. It's the perfect symbol of a much bigger shift. Japan, the same country once tied to Detroit through steel, engines, and car shows, isn't looking south anymore. It's looking north, toward Canada. While Washington builds walls and weaponizes trade, Ottawa has been quietly rewriting the rules. And the message is impossible to ignore. The future of cars, energy, and technology isn't being built in America. It's being built in Canada. Mark Carney's government didn't wait for Washington to calm down. They built an entirely new alliance, one that Japan just confirmed in front of the world. This isn't a trade adjustment, it's a geopolitical reset. And the moment Carney stepped onto that stage in Kuala Lumpur, the balance of global industry tilted north. When Trump launched his 25% tariffs on imported autos and metals, he promised a manufacturing renaissance. "We'll bring back jobs," he said. "We'll make cars here again." But the numbers told a very different story. Instead of investing in American plants, automakers began packing up. Subaru was the first to make it official, halting U.S. production for Canadian buyers and shifting everything back to Japan. The reason wasn't complicated. U.S. steel and aluminum prices had exploded. Producing in America now cost more than importing finished vehicles. Subaru's announcement sent a chill through the entire auto corridor. Workers who once built Outbacks for Canada now faced uncertainty. And while Washington spun excuses, investors noticed something deeper. Companies weren't expanding in America anymore. They were escaping it. Trump's tariffs created what economists now call reverse localization. Every policy meant to rebuild U.S. manufacturing actually drove it abroad. The auto industry, the pride of America's post-war boom, was becoming a casualty of political theater. Meanwhile, north of the border, Canada stayed calm. Instead of retaliating with noise, Ottawa moved with precision. They began negotiating quietly with Japan, Malaysia, and China. The strategy was simple. While America fought itself, Canada would become the safe harbor. Subaru's retreat wasn't an isolated story. It was part of a pattern. Toyota, Hyundai, and even China's EV giant BYD started redirecting their strategies. The U.S. market, once a badge of pride, was now a maze of tariffs and unpredictable rules. Toyota's sales in Canada surged 29% in July alone. The reason? Stability. Canada's open trade policies and predictable leadership gave companies breathing room. Carney's government didn't promise handouts. It offered consistency. For automakers, battered by tariffs, that consistency was gold. They could plan 5 years ahead without wondering if tomorrow's tweet would destroy their margins. In contrast, Washington's obsession with punishment made it impossible for manufacturers to plan at all. The results were visible on both sides of the border. American plants went idle. Canadian ports filled with ships carrying Japanese and Korean vehicles. The same models that once rolled out of Indiana were now assembled overseas and shipped north. This wasn't a coincidence. It was an exodus. Investors started calling it the Northern Shift. Every tariff announcement from the White House was followed by a new partnership signed in Ottawa. And yet, most Americans didn't realize it was happening. They thought the fight was about protecting jobs. In reality, it was about who could lead the next industrial era. Mark Carney saw the opportunity before anyone else did. While Trump weaponized trade, Carney weaponized trust. He understood that in a world addicted to uncertainty, predictability is power. His strategy was simple: rebuild Canada's reputation as the partner you could depend on. He spent months forging trade corridors with Japan, Malaysia, and China, not for headlines, but for longevity. He knew global corporations don't chase flags, they chase stability. Behind closed doors, Carney's team drafted what economists now call the Smart Trade Doctrine. It focused on transparent regulations, green manufacturing incentives, and open digital borders. Every clause was designed to attract industries burned by Washington's unpredictability. By the time Trump was threatening to tariff everything that moves, Canada had already positioned itself as the alternative: open, secure, and modern. Carney's approach wasn't glamorous. There were no victory rallies or late-night rants, just quiet deals, one after another, until the pattern became undeniable. When Washington slammed a door, Ottawa opened one wider. And when Japan began reconsidering its automotive partnerships, it didn't take long for Carney to step in. He didn't lecture Tokyo about loyalty. He offered collaboration, data sharing, and low-emission trade incentives. That's how diplomacy works when it's led by professionals, not showmen. Japan's pivot was more than a business adjustment. It was a geopolitical statement. For decades, Japan's auto industry revolved around U.S. consumption. But under Trump's tariff barrage, Japan realized something crucial. Dependence on America was now a liability. So, Tokyo began rerouting production through partners it could trust. Canada became that partner. The two nations quietly aligned under a framework that prioritized clean technology, open markets, and shared innovation. Subaru's move was just the beginning. Japanese automakers started using Canadian ports to reach North America, bypassing the U.S. entirely. With Carney's government cutting tariffs and simplifying cross-border regulations, it suddenly made sense. For Japan, Canada offered a backdoor into the Western market without the chaos. For Canada, it meant becoming the new bridge between Asia and the West, a role Washington once dominated. In this deal, the symbolism was clear. Japan wasn't running from America. It was choosing sanity over noise. And Canada wasn't begging for trade. It was being invited to lead. What started as a survival strategy evolved into a global shift. The automotive world was redrawing its routes, and every arrow pointed north.
When Mark Carney arrived in Kuala Lumpur for the ASEAN summit, few expected anything beyond polite diplomacy. But what unfolded on that stage stunned world leaders. Standing before representatives from Japan, Malaysia, China, and Indonesia, Carney didn't deliver a speech filled with vague promises or political slogans. He delivered a declaration of independence. Calm, measured, and precise, he looked directly at the cameras and said, "We'll have discussions with the United States when they're ready, but we're not sitting still." That single line changed everything. It was more than a jab at Washington. It was a statement of global leadership. For decades, Canada had been defined as America's quiet neighbor, following the larger partner's lead. But that day, the roles reversed. Carney was telling the world that Canada no longer needed permission to act. And he proved it with action, not words. Within hours of his speech, Ottawa finalized new trade frameworks with Japan, Malaysia, and China, agreements worth billions in clean technology, AI, and electric vehicle production. These weren't symbolic gestures. They were blueprints for a new industrial order. While Trump's America hid behind tariffs and trade walls, Carney's Canada built partnerships that would define the next decade. His message resonated across the Pacific. Stability is the new currency of power. And Carney had just made Canada the bank. The press called it the Carney Doctrine. Economists called it the Asian turn. But ordinary Canadians saw something simpler, proof that quiet strength still wins. Because while America tweeted threats, Carney signed deals. While Washington burned bridges, Ottawa built them. And as the summit ended, one thing became clear. The world was no longer waiting for America to lead. It was following Canada instead. After the ASEAN summit, Carney's words quickly turned into tangible results.
Within months, Japan's biggest automakers began rerouting their shipments north. Subaru, Toyota, and Mazda quietly shifted logistics channels through Canadian ports, bypassing the United States entirely. BYD, the Chinese electric vehicle powerhouse, announced new distribution centers in Quebec and British Columbia. And that was just the beginning. Canada was no longer just a customer in the automotive world. It had become a gateway, a bridge connecting Asia's factories to North America's consumers. Vancouver replaced Los Angeles as the preferred port for EV imports, and Montreal became the new hub for clean battery technology. In Ontario, Japanese investors poured billions into advanced manufacturing plants that promised both jobs and green innovation.